Listen, it's a complicated issue.
You were left alone in the hospital with a nurse.
To be honest, it was hard. The gap in the health is known. Going to rural areas, always for me, there's a lot of uncertainties with what's the next step, what's going to happen.
Welcome, everybody, to MedCentresTV. I'm your host, Dion Raju. Today, we're going to go through the journey of a young female GP working in rural Australia. With us today is the lovely Dr. Nada. Welcome, Dr. Nada.
Thanks, Dion.
I've got to say, you look absolutely fabulous today.
Oh, thank you.
What is that beautiful shawl you're using?
Oh, it's an Aboriginal shawl. It was gifted to me in Moree by the Aboriginal community there.
It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. First, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet in and pay respect to their elderlies, both past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders tribes. Now, coming back to me, my story, basically, I was a medical student in Jordan, and during my 6 years of medical school, we have an elective term. So during the elective term, we were offered to do it outside of our university and the city that we were studying in. And through one of my professors, my gynae professors, he offered me and a couple of students to do our elective term in Australia. And that's how it all started in 2011 when I came to Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney as an elective student. Worked in obstetric and gynecology for 3 months and then went back home to Jordan, finished my medical school. I got really encouraged and I like kind of the working here. So I was working on doing the Australian medical exams from overseas. So I've done some in Jordan, I've done some in London. During that time, I had done my internship and I entered the training program in obstetric and gynecology. So I was accredited trainee for 2 years there. By then, I was interviewing for jobs through Zoom and phone. And, I really didn't know whether it would work or not. It was kind of, part of the thing that I was doing aside, not thinking that it will happen. And then I got a job offer from RPA. Giving me some short notice. They needed a doctor back then to kind of, move. And that was when I kind of went to my parents and said, I've got a job in Sydney. And they were very supportive. They were a bit concerned and worried, of course, for the daughter, young daughter to kind of leave on her own. But they were very supportive. So I came on a working visa in 2014. It was a standard pathway from the Middle East. So I had to repeat all the exams. I had to do English test IELTS every 2 years, which was a bit crazy. But at the background, you have a busy job and then you never know what's happening to your visa, what's happening with the exams. So I had a lot on my plate all the time. I had
stressful,
a bit of a...
to say the least, isn't it?
Yes, it was. And being on your own as well in a new country. So I would say I had a tough couple of years to start with. Being as an international medical graduate, there are certain rules. So they don't, it's you apply, and then being international, you kind of must work in rural areas. And part of that as well, you're under 10 years of moratorium, meaning you have to change your location every 6 months or stay longer term in rural remote areas. So you kind of have more limited options in comparison to my colleagues that I worked with from Commonwealth countries or other, where they kind of have only to do 1 year of training in Australia. In any hospital, they get the residency and they're equal to any Australian graduate and they continue the training.
To do how many years?
Of moratorium, 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you got your placement.
So I got posted to Moree. And
so when was this?
That was in 2019.
2019.
Yeah, for 2.5 years.
For 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's when your journey working in rural Australia began.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are this young female GP landing in a charter plane, I suppose.
Yeah, correct.
In Moree. So, who picks you up from the airport, and what happens from there?
Oh, Mary. I hope she kind of, if she sees me now,
Yes.
hey, Mary. She's a taxi driver there
Right.
in Moree. And yeah, basically, as you can tell, I wasn't like fully prepared. That's kind of the history, put the history aside. I was like this city girl with the heels and Louis Vuitton and whatnot, and
Yes.
then arriving kind of with, but I adapted so quickly. So Mary got me, and then I went to the hospital accommodation. And then the next day I started working at the Aboriginal medical corporation there, which was further away in the mission, in what we call it a mission. And part of my placement there, it was as well working at their medical centre in Mangandai and Tumala. So it's like every fortnight in Mangandai and every fortnight in Tumala, which is like a smaller community.
How big is? What's the community?
Tumala has almost maybe less than 200 people.
Wow. Okay.
And it's a bit further away. Mangandai has a bit more, so around, don't quote me on this, but I think around the 700 mark. But Moree was a bigger town, of course, so it's kind of was serving for multiple other towns around it. And unfortunately, the population was trending down with time. So it went, I believe, from 11,000 to 7,000 within a short period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was your introduction to Moree
Yeah.
and the surrounding areas.
Yeah.
Small towns, not major population. You working at the Aboriginal clinic, and then. How did you feel?
To be honest, it was hard. It was hard. As I said, they I loved them as a family, and it was warm for me, and that was the thing that kept me going. But as in town, the rural experience in itself, they say it's not for everyone. Maybe it is not. It is a little bit hard because when I went there, it was drought. There is not a lot of things to do around, apart from going, to the pub, to people who go there. Like there's not many like venues or fun times, at least for me, so it is a little bit different. It was a bit different than what I'm used to. And I'm like kind of I don't want to kind of talk about being like I'm tougher now, but seeing a snake, and there was like the mice plague and there things and there was a flood that happened while I was there. So all of the things that I haven't been experienced before on my own was a little bit daunting, but I think if anything, as they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Well, it certainly did.
Yeah, so I miss the Aboriginal community there a lot, and I'm kind of look forward to go there again and help. But to live long term, it takes a lot from someone. But what I think is that the help to the areas of need, let's call it, right? Where there's a shortage of doctors, shortage of medical assistants and stuff, should be distributed along all the medical force in Australia, and not linked to internationals per se, if that makes sense. I think that's how we can solve the problem for the long run. Exactly.
Okay.
And will prevent kind of things from happening, like people going there without an option, or like having a family elsewhere, or there's a lot of things in the background that could happen to different doctors. But I feel whenever there is an area of need, yes, the need should be distributed among all doctors.
So here you are, young female GP.
Yeah.
In rural Australia.
Yeah.
So you've completed your exams
Yeah.
and you've qualified in Jordan.
Yeah.
And so you come back.
Yes.
And you have to go through that process again, right? And it's almost as if you have to do it twice. And then now you're in rural Australia.
Yeah.
And you had to work calls, is that right? you had to be on call on certain weekends?
Yeah. So basically, it depends on the areas that you worked at, because I kind of worked in Tamworth as well, in private clinic, but also in the Aboriginal community there. There is a hospital.
Yep.
Some of the doctors work at the hospital, some do not. But if once you work at the hospital, it was kind of, as in double, like you're in charge of the hospital at that time. But of course, with much less staff in there.
But you're still in training, right?
Yes, yeah.
So
you are.
you left alone in the hospital with a nurse. And where's your support?
You're basically it varies. You try to make it as safe as possible. In double, for example, during the day there's a lot of staff, and you have during the night you have your on-call specialist on the phone to call when needed.
How far is that?
Wouldn't be too far. However, in Moree, the hospital system was a little bit more, challenging, because it was only like you, and then if something happened, then you have to call Tamworth Hospital. I mean, things changed during my time there, because first it was like the GP, whomever is in call at the hospital, they are as well still working in the clinic, and there's only a nurse covering the hospital, which is sometimes not enough, so we kind of raised some concerns, and then they asked for some locum fly in, fly out to cover until one of the GPs is free to go. But I mean, yes, there is a lot of need. There is a lot of need there. The issue, Dion, this opens lot of other things. First, I want to say we're lucky that we're in Australia, because first, we can talk about things. We can work together to make things better. I believe we have that freedom of speech and opinion, and kind of we just want to make our community better and better.
From a mental health perspective, things that you saw that impacted you and would stay with you.
Yes.
And the second thing is that the feeling amongst overseas trained grads that have to go out, work in these places, subject to the moratorium. What is that like for an overseas trained grad? And what has been some of the experiences that has really impacted you working in rural Australia?
I don't want to kind of, act tougher than what I am, but I mean, it was hard. It was always, for me, there's a lot of uncertainties with what's the next step, what's going to happen, visa-wise, work-wise, exams-wise, the pressure of moving in different kind of places every 6 months, or different specialties as well. So as once you get used and kind of get what to know in certain thing, it's time to move again. You need to jump out of your comfort zone a lot of the times, and you don't have, time. You need to adapt like this and kind of and do it. You don't have another option. When you kind of don't have another option, you need to put your power back together. But moving from Jordan, working as an obstetrician, gynecologist for a while, and doing there, then going to another hospital, doing surgery and other stuff, and then going again to another town, then going to rural areas and seeing how much the Aboriginal health is struggling, and there is the big gap between
you
the
were
people.
telling me off camera about certain instances where you were walking to work in the morning, you've seen some stuff, and the other outbreaks of stuff, and some of the kind of patients you see. Can you elaborate, just so viewers know about what it is like, the impact, seeing these kind of, I'll let you elaborate more on the hangings, the outbreak of syphilis, some of the patients you saw here.
Listen, it's a complicated issue, and it's a sensitive issue. So I want to kind of keep in mind all kind of, the respect to all the Aboriginal communities there. But the gap in the health is known. Maybe to some health, like poor health practices at some times. But you keep in mind it is a very sensitive, and that's what they went through in the past, because transgenerational trauma is something that exists, which kind of make someone more prone to be depressed, still traumatized, maybe holding some anger and injustice feeling inside, which takes a time for healing as well. So you need to keep all of these in mind as you are approaching someone who are suffering from other medical health problems. But there is a lot of comorbidities with uncontrolled diabetes, hypertension, outbreaks of infectious diseases. So it took me, to be honest, like, you know, even other staff leaving at 5, I would stay, you know, up until midnight trying to get in the clinic, trying to get everything I can do to try to kind of help and improve. Of course, by one person things, you know, there's so much you can do. But, you know, that's kind of from the health perspective. But you do tend to learn a lot. So I say, like, maybe I was like from Sydney going to Moree, or like maybe my other colleagues from different backgrounds, they didn't have to go the same pathway and hurdles that I had to do. But I as well, again, tried to take the positive side. I think I learned much more. I had to do procedures on my own, everything on my own, deliver kids, do whatever I can with the settings that I have. Because again, like, that's what you need to do. Like, if you want to wait for help 3 hours away, you could lose the patient. So despite I was thinking I'm a little bit less fortunate than my other colleagues on a different pathway, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger again. So now I kind of see myself, not seeing myself better or anything, but the skills that I've learned does help me along a lot. Of course, you know, it was like a bit of an isolated medical mission, but you can see like kangaroos were around from the when you look from the window. They were like, first day I saw a black snake and I was like terrified. I think everyone was looking at me. Why are you terrified? It's normal. You know, black snakes are good. They eat brown snakes. And I'm like, no, oh my God. And I got locked in the clinic the first day. So I had to call the taxi driver, and it was my first day. They didn't, of course, all the town was almost, they know each other.
Of course.
It's like, who's this strange kind of girl, like waving and saying, oh, come on, help me, please. I need to get out. And I remember it took him a while to get out of the car. And I had like to have his help to jump off the gate to the other side. And next day, the whole town knows about this kind of new doctor who jumped off the gate. And this, it was like, it was a learning curve and experience. I would say, yes, it was a little bit kind of in the rural areas. It is isolating. There's not much to do. And I experienced, I think, in one of the tough times of the droughts, the floods, mice plague, which was tough. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did the experience, the introduction to the community?
Listen, it was a great experience. Now, like, we're talking about this, which I didn't expect, but I mean, it is bringing a lot of memories back. I've developed like a lot of great deep connections with the Aboriginal communities there. I was close to them. First, of course, everything was a bit different, and I kind of, you know, took me a time to indulge, but afterwards, they really have a warm heart there. Once they know you, they know your good intentions, they know how much you care and you really want to help from your heart, and then you're doing everything you can to try to help with their health and with their families. They take you in and they really love you and look after you. They are very family oriented, and they do have a lot of respect to their elderlies, to their uncles, aunties, grandparents, which is amazing to kind of see that culture going. The language was lost a little bit in the new generation, but some of the elderlies would like, they kept the language and they taught me some of the things there, which I kind of really, you know, really fancy, and I wish, you know, kind of, you know, just goes and progress and develop again more and more. Their food and the culture and what they do, went to their houses, celebrated with their families and had really good time.
As an overseas trained graduate, do you feel that you have to work harder?
100%.
You exposed to more challenges?
100%. It goes back kind of to feeling sometimes the process is a little bit not fair in the middle, because like you come in, you kind of, you do exams, you have the same kind of degree or even better than your, other colleagues, but it all goes back to what your background is, and then you get allocated or you have to do like more because of that. It's a bit complicated, and I think a lot of patients and other doctors who are Australian graduates maybe not even knowing about what's happening with that. But when I worked with my other colleagues from the first year in the metropolitan areas and the big hospitals, if they come from Commonwealth areas or like any other places, they have like to do a 1 year, and then their equivalent. They get their permanent residency. They can apply to any training program. For me, it was different. You have to wait like the 5 years to get that. So you have to do all different terms, different jobs, all the night shifts, but you can't apply for a training program apart from GP training because of you don't hold that yet. So it was definitely much more difficult. I had to repeat exams. I had to do English exams every 2 years. Never certainty which was happening with my visa. Plans have changed because of years after years kind of come in, but you have to work more, definitely more. Definitely you don't say no to a lot of things because you don't have another option. So you take more of like the shifts or the terms that no one else wants to do, from ICU, obstetrics, surgery, going to rural areas. I believe and the 10 years moratorium of having having to move every 6 months if you're in not a rural location, having to change your location every 6 months. So every time you get, your build your stability, how things are going, boom, it's time to kind of, go again out of your comfort zone and jump again. Of course, it makes you stronger. Of course, you learn a lot, you see a lot, but it is definitely more hurdles, definitely harder. The medical system in Australia has been depending on international graduates to do the GP training in rural areas for years.
Right.
And it saddens me in some ways when I see patients all the time coming to the room and then they say, whenever we find a good GP, they leave. They have to leave, or they have to leave again, which they don't understand that's part of a moratorium, for example, or part of what the process is. The other thing, they are like really hardworking. So they would, for the amount of the Medicare rebate and the bulk billing service that they provide, they must see 80, 100, 120 patients a day. So imagine doing that amount of work to kind of get reasonable income through Medicare and bulk billing. But what is the effect on the patient's care on the other hand? Do you give time? Do you listen to those patients? Do you miss things? You're a person, you're a human as well. How much energy and brain do you have like to see that many amount of... Exactly, without missing a diagnosis, without a mistake that happens unintentionally, and with giving the time that the patient need. So things are changing so that now there are like more Australian graduates that they would raise the issue of, no, not going to see that many number of patients. No, we want a private kind of a fee to be able to see less amount of patients that. But things are taking a long time, and there is a cultural accept, because that's what people are used to for a long time, and changing, it's taking time. But as I said, there are things that could get better.
Of course.
Yeah.
And last but not least, what's your advice to any young graduate that's going to be placed in rural Australia, be it an international graduate or a local graduate? What's your advice to them in terms of expectations, approach?
I always tell my medical students and the junior doctors to try to enjoy the process. Medicine is a long process. It's something that you give your life to. it's like a marriage contract,
Right.
more or less. So you have to be very loyal and give it a big portion of your life if you want to be a good doctor and proceed. So enjoying it is the key. So try to enjoy what you go through, no matter how hard it is. Try to learn. Don't get upset if you don't get what you want at the time, because there's other plans and other doors that can come in. Definitely, I'd advise everyone to help in covering the need in rural areas and where it's needed, out of option and out of for first to help our nations and our people, second to upskill their skills and kind of be better doctors. But it should be optional and distributed among all doctors.
Well, Dr. Nada, it was fabulous. It was awesome having you on the show. You certainly are passionate about what you do. And thank you for sharing that experience with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dion.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone back home and all our audience and viewers, hope you enjoyed the show. From all of us here at MedCenters TV, bye for now.